your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and this is our weekend edition on Friday as we cover a number of the issues from this week and things headlining and some of the challenges we're facing as a country. Joining me in studio, Jeff Mateer. He's the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and Chief Legal Counsel at First Liberty Institute. And also joining me by phone, Liberty McArtor. She's with Point of View, and she does the Know Why podcast. Liberty, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
And Jeff, you're in here in the studio, and let's start out with sort of the big news of this week is the tariff issue. It is August 1st. The new tariffs have come in unless you've gotten an exemption, and a few countries have gotten an exemption. China has gotten an exemption. But it's been a long slog here for the first 6 months as President Trump has imposed tariffs, then kind of put them off a little bit, then imposed them again, then kind of put them off. We came out with our reciprocal tariffs in April. The stock market and the bond market all tanked for that. Trump put those on hold again, and he was going to do July the 9th, I think it was, and then he pushed that back to August 1st, and now it seems like we're really getting into some of the tariffs that are going on. So what's happening out there?
Yeah, and I guess he said, at least yesterday, that even though August 1 was the deadline, implementation isn't until August 7. So we've got a little push there, and given an extension to, I believe, Mexico. We're going to negotiate with Mexico for a few more weeks. I mean, look, I know you join me in this as a conservative Republican, someone who's committed to free trade. This is tough right now. If you're a free trade advocate, seeing this is tough. But if we take a step back, we're going to have to evaluate. It's hard to evaluate. I mean, as an economist, it's hard to evaluate things in the middle of it, right? We've got to wait and see how certain things play out, because it's really, in the end, what we're going to evaluate. What deals are going to be struck with regard to the trade agreements. And this is what I'm telling myself, buddy. This is what I'm telling myself is just wait. Your normal reaction is tariffs are really bad. Tariffs are bad. Free trade is good. If the result, when we look at this months from now, years, that the result is more free trade, then we're going to applaud this. But it may be really tough over the next few weeks and months as we watch the stock market, as perhaps we see inflation go up. That's going to be really tough.
Liberty, when I stop in stores, I see prices going up, not terribly in some cases, but sort of edging up in some cases. In other cases, things have been steady. Are you seeing the prices go up out there?
It certainly seems like that in some cases. And I think that a lot of families are probably still leery just because of the inflation spike under Biden. And so anything that's going to affect that grocery bill and just the day-to-day costs that, people have to pay, I think that they're going to be skeptical of that. I'm interested to see if the stated goal of bringing more jobs to the U.S. and more production to the U.S. unfolds. So I think that's one of the goals I'm most sympathetic to. But I know that we have more jobs and workers right now as well. So I'm interested to see if that is a benefit that we get in the long term because of this.
It's interesting when you talk about jobs out there, because we see headlines daily on the economy. Some companies are doing well, some aren't. And I was looking at the Wall Street Journal's business and finance section yesterday, and it's among the stories they have, I'm reading some of the headlines here. Ford posts first loss since 2023 following $800 million tariff hit. And then I turn to the next page and I see Nissan post quarterly loss. Tariffs damp Porsche's outlook. Mercedes warns of big revenue dent from levies. And it says demand wane for Harley motorcycles is down. So you look through that and you think, those don't look like good headlines. On the other hand, a few companies have come out and done very well in the so far. And Microsoft just a couple of days ago had a really strong earnings and its stock price shot up. So it's really confusing out here. And then today we hear about the job openings, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics lowered their estimates for the past few months to where I think it was 73,000 new jobs, but for the past few months they dropped them significantly, meaning that it looks like, I think this is one of the worst hiring summers that we've seen in the country for some years.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is that the manufacturing companies who do rely on whether it's imported goods or components, they've been for the most part absorbing costs.
Yes,
waiting to see what happens. They don't want to do a huge price increase, but at some point, if the materials remain high in price, then those are going to come to the consumer. They have to come to the consumer eventually. So it really is. That's why I'm going to this wait and see. Let's see where we are in 60 days. But it's Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the art of the deal, and he, it's the highest stakes he's ever played, and he's playing it right now. And the job numbers are not good. That's a little disturbing. And if the result is prices increase and inflation, we lived through a time of high inflation at the end of the Carter administration.
We did.
And that would be just devastating. So let's hope that what this is that we'll get some good trade deals. We'll open up more fair trade, and prices will remain stable. But the one that I'm really interested in watching is the auto manufacturing, because so much, even American cars, components come from overseas, and where those prices go, because America's still very much, car manufacturing is important to America.
It is very important. And it's interesting. I've gotten 2 calls from the dealership I bought my car from 6 years ago. 6 years ago.
Time for a new one, huh?
Asking if I'm interested in selling, if I want to bring it in, give me some estimated prices and so forth. And of course, if new car prices are going up, that typically means used car prices go up a little bit as well, because demand turns to that.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing on the used cars, there aren't any. Because people are holding on to their cars because the prices have gone up, and me. So how about you, Liberty? You holding on to your car?
We're not planning on, trading in, selling anytime soon. We're going to get every little bit out of those vehicles.
Liberty, when we come back, the MAGA people have generally been very supportive of Trump so far, I think, including with the tariffs. The one thing that sort of stopped that has been Jeffrey Epstein, incidentally. But I'm curious to see how you think the MAGA people are going to continue supporting him with the tariffs, and if the economy starts wavering a little bit. My guest in studio, Jeff Mateer with the First Liberty Institute, Liberty McArtor with Point of View, and we're going to come back in a little bit and talk a little bit more about this. Plus, there was a legal hearing before an appeals court yesterday about Trump's tariffs. So stay with us. We'll be back on Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The Trump administration recently unveiled their plans for the Golden Dome. I was intrigued by the response to this new missile defense system. As you would imagine, Russia and China condemned the plans. Most Americans didn't have much to say about the plans. Go back a few decades and nearly everyone criticized a similar plan. It was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, and dubbed by critics as Star Wars. I remember prominent scientists like Carl Sagan ridiculing the idea that a defense missile could be fired into space to destroy an incoming missile from the Soviet Union. It is much harder to criticize the science behind the Golden Dome now that everyone has seen how effective Israel's Iron Dome has become. Alan Zhang argues that the Golden Dome is America's answer to China's space weapons. He points to the irony of China condemning this defense system because it's turning supposedly outer space into a new arena for armed confrontation. Of course, such condemnation is deeply hypocritical. The Golden Dome, he says, is a defensive system developed in response to the rapid expansion of military space programs by China and other adversarial powers. Its purpose is to serve as a shield designed to intercept a range of inbound threats, including ballistic, cruise, and hypersonic missiles. Let's put a few facts on the table. In just the last 6 years, China has tripled the number of intelligence satellites they put into orbit. China's military has also been exploring the use of what are called fractional orbital bombardment systems. This technology was used during the Cold War to evade early warning radars. Contrary to what Russia and China are saying, this defensive shield is not destabilizing. It is a deterrence against the military intentions of these two enemies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of Israel, go to viewpoints.info/Israel. Viewpoints.info/Israel. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we're back on Point of View. Liberty McArtor joining us by phone, Jeff Mateer in studio. And Liberty, the MAGA group has been very, very supportive of President Trump on almost anything he does. The Jeffrey Epstein thing seems to be a little bit of a glitch. But if the economy starts going down, if people start losing their jobs, do you think they'll continue to support that if we move, if not into a recession, just an economic slowdown?
I think that combination could be one of the few things that would lessen support for President Trump among his most loyal base, especially now that this is his last term in office. So time is already ticking. People may feel less of an obligation. And I really think with the Epstein issue, we had a case of over-promising and under-delivering, clearly. And I really believe that that's something that the MAGA base cares a lot about, and that's something that they were promised and that was going to be released and revealed. And now you have some of the very people who are the biggest proponents of that now in the administration at the FBI, kind of seeming like they're reneging on that promise. So when the closer you are to kind of the influencers, maybe in the media, I think there's going to be more of a motivation to be loyal to Trump. I think among voters, if the economy starts to go down, plus the disappointment of the Epstein files fiasco continues, I think you're going to see people feeling less of an obligation to be loyal to Trump and looking to who's going to be the next president.
You know, Jeff, the MAGA group have been pretty supportive of tariffs, even though his conservatives, Republicans typically have been sort of free trade. But there was a court trial yesterday, an appeals court trial, and it did not go well for the administration, I think.
Yeah, there was an argument yesterday in Washington, D.C., and so it's in the Federal Circuit for the U.S. Court of Appeals, which is a specialized court that hears, among other things, patent law cases and international trade cases. And so that's why the tariff case was there. It's 11 judges, so it was an argument in front of 11 judges, and the plaintiffs are challenging that the president has authority to institute these tariffs unilaterally. And the administration is arguing that using a law that says in an emergency situation, then the president does have this authority. And so the question is, are we in this situation which authorizes the president to take these actions? And it's a difficult argument for the Trump administration because, as in the past, people on the right have always argued, well, that's what the left always does. Everything is an emergency, and therefore, there's unlimited power because of that. And so the Trump administration is having to say that this is an extraordinary situation that requires these type of measures unilaterally and without involving the Congress.
And the background on this is that the Constitution vests in Congress the power to levy taxes and I think handle trade. And with the tariffs, that's both the tariff is a tax, but it's also a trade issue. But Congress has ceded to the president over several times some authority, and generally limited and temporary, to be able to use tariffs and other things to address what the president says is an emergency. And so if it's a limited and targeted, then it's one thing, and temporary, then it's one thing. But President Trump is using the tariffs as sort of a long-term negotiating trade rule, as far as we can tell right now. And so that's the challenge being imposed upon him. And if this court decides against the Trump administration, and my understanding from the news reports is most of the judges were somewhat skeptical of Trump saying you've got that Congress gave you this much authority. What would happen to it next then?
Oh, it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Trump will do it. So they've lost. The case originally was there are all these specialized courts that that most people don't even know exist. And so this case was originally filed in I think it's called the International Trade Court, which is a lower
court of international trade.
And Trump lost there.
Right.
So he appeals. It goes to the federal circuit. And if the Trump administration loses, whoever loses at the federal circuit will go to the Supreme Court. Okay.
Well, if the courts end up ruling and the Supreme Court ends up ruling against him, that could be you could get us going back to the initial free trade approach, because it might undermine many or all of his tariffs, I guess.
Well, or the alternative is, he does have majority, the Republican majorities in the House and in the Senate, and the way normally these things are handled, you would go through the Congress.
And that's been my argument all along. It needs to go through Congress, since that's their constitutional authority to do this. And if you get the approval of Congress, the House and the Senate, I may not agree with it, but you've gone through the constitutional approach of getting the majority support for that. So is this going to end up being a problem for him because so much has rested on his ability to be able to move tariffs? And to be fair to him, the tariffs have sort of forced the European countries to say, okay, we'll provide more funding for military expenses to help with Ukraine. We'll raise our military spending. He's been able to get some other things done because of that.
Yeah, I think it would present a problem. Now, I would say he does have. his lawyers do have an argument. It's not a crazy argument. There is a law that Congress passed in So it's not just he's acting. He is acting pursuant to a law, and it's a law. And I had to look it up to have the exact right name: International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
Right.
And the administration's argument is that that's the power that they're exercising. That gives us. Now, the problem that the administration has, it's never been used to enact tariffs. It has been used to enact economic sanctions and penalties against bad actors in the world. And so, the Trump administration argument is, well, this is the same thing because there are bad actors who are unfairly competing. And so we're responding to them. That's created this emergency situation.
Liberty, what are your thoughts about how this is going to end up affecting Trump if the Supreme Court ultimately takes this on and decides against the tariffs?
It's interesting. I'm learning so much, things that we haven't necessarily heard before, or that yes, and I think the nation is. And I guess the thing that I'm curious about is whether he's successful or not. What kind of precedent does this set up for the future? I know he's kind of pushing the boundaries of maybe some of the authority that he's arguing rests within the executive branch, or exactly what that applies to. And what is that going to mean for the future? Does that open doors for other people to do the same things, but in potentially ways that we don't like? So I'm just curious about the precedent that it would set.
And, Jeff, that's a really important point, because the Trump administration has been moving towards what I think they call the unitary executive, which says virtually all power. The Constitution gives him virtually all power over the executive branch, and we've got a lot of agencies under the executive branch. We've got the Federal Reserve Bank under the executive branch. The Supreme Court has pushed back on that one a little. But if once President Trump is only in for a few more years, then you could have a Democrat or you could have a different Republican. And if you set the precedent for a lot of power, we may come to regret that if he's successful.
No, and the Trump administration is pushing the limits on executive power. And again, it's something that many of us were very concerned, initially with the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it could even go back further to Clinton. But certainly during my work, we were very concerned about some of the actions coming out of the Obama administration. And then that was followed by the Biden administration, and thinking that those presidential administrations were overstepping their authority. Well, the Trump administration has just put it up a completely different notch. Now, what's interesting is, what does the Supreme Court do with this? Mm-hmm. And you do have, Justice Kavanaugh came out of an administration, and his history is very pro executive branch. Mm. And so if you can count on his vote, mm-hmm. You only need one. Assuming that you keep Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, because they usually think those are going to be the most pro mm-hmm. Trump administration, and then you've got Kavanaugh, and then you've got to either get Roberts or Barrett, and that's a victory. But Liberty's point is well taken. Yes, this could create real. Looking ahead, and when Josh Shapiro is president, or Gavin Newsom. I can go worse. AOC.
Yes.
This could be really bad.
So it goes back to that notion of be careful what you wish for, because you might get it.
Exactly.
Well, coming up on our next segment, we've got Dr. H. Sterling Burnett with the Heartland Institute. The Environmental Protection Agency took a very big step this week, reversing some of the things that have been pushed by the Democrats in Congress, especially related to carbon emissions. And this is a major change in policy, and it's going to affect a lot of things, including our cars. So stay with us. When we come back, we'll have Dr. Sterling Burnett on to join us and explain what is going on with the EPA and what it did. So stay with us on Point of View.
The Bible tells us not to worry, and yet there is a lot of worrying stuff in our world today. Thankfully, the Bible doesn't stop at telling us not to worry. God gives us a next step. He says we need to pray. But sometimes even knowing what to pray can be difficult, and that is why Point of View has relaunched our Pray for America movement, a series of weekly emails to guide you in prayer for our nation. Each week you'll receive a brief update about a current issue affecting Americans, along with a written prayer that you can easily share with others. We'll also include a short free resource for you in each email so you can learn more about the issue at hand. Will you commit to pray for America? Go to pointofview.net. Click on the Pray for America banner at the top of the page to subscribe. Again, that's pointofview.net. Click on the Pray for America banner. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in America. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome back to Point of View. Joining us by phone is Dr. H. Sterling Burnett. We've had him on several times. He is the director of the Heartland Institute's Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy and the editor of Heartland's Climate Change Weekly email, which I receive, and you should too. So you should sign up for that. Sterling, thank you for joining us.
Great to be back on again.
All right, so the EPA did something I think you would have wanted them to do a long time ago, but the EPA did something major this week. Tell us what they did and how it affects us.
What the EPA did this week is the greatest deregulatory effort, the largest, the most profound impact on undermining federal climate efforts that's ever been undertaken. They have rescinded something called the endangerment finding. The endangerment finding was a mistake made under, really under the second President Bush, after the Supreme Court made an erroneous sort of pulled from the air decision that the EPA had the power to regulate greenhouse gases as pollutants, despite the fact that there's no evidence whatsoever Congress ever intended CO2 and other gases to be counted as pollutants, that they are toxic like the pollutants that Congress did allow regulation of. The Supreme Court made that decision. It left it to the EPA saying, now that we've determined it's a pollutant, science be damned, you must regulate it if you find it endangers human health and the environment. And the EPA, which likes to expand its mission, promptly cited the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and says, because it causes climate change, they're in danger to human health and the environment. And that set off the cascade of regulations that tell you what kind of stoves you can buy or limit kind of stoves and air conditioners that can be sold, that limit the kinds of cars or redirect you to the kinds of cars the government wants you to buy, that restricts power plants to the kinds of power supplies, intermittent, unreliable, deadly power supplies that the government wants you to have. This all flowed from the endangerment finding. And now the government has said, you know what, we've reviewed this finding, this now, 16-year-old finding, and we find it wasn't justified from the start, that there's no evidence that U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are endangering human health or welfare. The tenuous links to future climate, the links to future climate change are too tenuous to uphold, and it's not a traditional pollutant. So under the Clean Air Act, we can't do what we've been doing. Now, we all know this is going to get litigated, and there's a lot of hoopla, but there's a good scientific report that the DOE put out that underpins the basis for finding it's not a threat to human health. And I think ultimately the Supreme Court might be on track when push comes to shove to overturning a really bad decision it made in light of decisions it's made since then.
So assuming this goes forward, how does it affect our lives?
Well, it affects our lives this way. The government will not be able to tell you, it will not be incentivizing or be able to tell you, sorry, you got to get rid of your gasoline, your gasoline powered or diesel powered car. Not, at least not because of any kind of climate impact. It will stop subsidizing electric vehicles. Right now, they get a big benefit, but a lot of people don't realize it. The only reason Tesla makes money is not on sales. It is on sales and the carbon credits that they can then sell to other automakers. And the reason that other automakers lose so much money on their electric vehicles is because they have to buy these credits from Tesla. Well, it destroys the carbon credit market because it's no longer requirement or given by government. You can pick your own air conditioner or a gas stove if you want a gas stove, or a gas water heater if you want a gas water heater. The government has no role in telling you, nope, we're going to go all electric. You might be able to keep some coal power plants online and maybe even build some new ones. Natural gas will take precedence, or nuclear will take precedence over increasing wind and solar, because the mandate for wind and solar and battery backup, the most expensive forms of energy and the least reliable forms of energy, all flows from the endangerment finding. You get rid of that, you get rid of the justification for all of that stuff.
So will this be good for the economy, you think, then?
You know, that's one of the arguments they make against this. Oh, you're going to destroy all these jobs. China's going to take the leadership in green energy. I encourage China to take the leadership in bad energy. I encourage China to keep making solar panels that are piling up all over their nation, and electric vehicles that are piling up in lots all over their country. I don't want to be a leader in bad energy. It will create jobs. It will, more importantly, we don't want, how we measure our energy system shouldn't be we value more jobs per unit of energy produced. We should want fewer jobs per unit of energy produced. We want efficient energy production. That means that other jobs, people can go do other more productive jobs. I don't want 1,000 solar installers. I want 1,000 engineers or AI techs. They get paid more. I want people in the oil and gas fields. They get paid more, and they produce domestic energy. More important than the economic impact, I think, is the national security impact. It puts us on the path to be more secure, nationally secure in our energy supply. We will no longer be beholden to China, who is no friend of us, for the technologies and the critical minerals that are necessary for the technologies that almost all come from China. China dominates the market for batteries, wind turbines, all the rare earth elements that go into these things, for solar panels. Who's the king? China. Do we really want to be dependent on China for our energy? I don't think so.
Yeah, Dr. Burnett, this is Jeff Mateer. Just a quick, question, observation. Either you interpret it either way, but what I'm most excited about this, because I agree with you. I think this is this on the economic front. This may be the greatest thing the Trump administration has done to date. And and it goes back to the question Dr. Matthews was asking as well. I mean, if the EPA says that these the regulations that have come from this rule have cost us $1 trillion, and I don't even know how many zeros that is. I'm sure Dr. Matthews does, but $1 trillion and could save more than 54 billion a year. What excites me is letting that money stay in the hands of entrepreneurs and businesses who are able to invest and develop and use it in productive means. I just think that, to me, that is just a massive impact on our economy that we're not going to see today, but in the years ahead, we are going to see. It's going to create more jobs. It's going to create more opportunities. And I loved your comment. Yeah, let the Chinese do the outdated stuff. Let's move on to the future.
You hit on something very important right there. We have now had more than 30 years of stolen opportunity costs stolen from average people. Being told the government knows best what technologies work. The government almost always never knows best what technologies work. If government has to subsidize something, then that means it can't compete in the marketplace because it doesn't serve the purpose as well as things that are already serving that purpose. And so they have taken for 30 years scarce resources and plowed them into a black hole, and that's bad enough. They run up the debt, they run up the deficit in the process. But more importantly, that money, the resources, could have gone to other things that would have made us more prosperous, that might have made us more prosperous, that would have made us better off, that would have reduced energy poverty, that we could have exported to developing countries to make them less poor and more able to confront natural disasters when they occur, to electrify them. Wouldn't that have been a better world than squandering it on all this stupid, but profitable for political insiders technology? And so you're right. Going forward, this will help. And the money that we save Hopefully it'll stay in our pockets. It will go to investment. But also, we should be a little bit happy, I think, about the reduction in the deficit, the reduction in long-term debt. When we founded this country, nearly 250 years ago now, one of the lead placards, the big saying was, "No taxation without representation."
Sterling,
we have spent decades taxing future generations with debt.
We're going to have to do that. Thank you so much, Sterling, for joining us.
Thank you.
School discipline policies in several states are changing for the better. The shift comes after President Trump issued an executive order last April aimed at restoring common sense to school discipline. The order states the federal government will no longer tolerate known risks to children's safety and well-being in the classroom that result from the application of school discipline based on discriminatory and unlawful equity ideology. In 2014, the Obama administration issued guidelines stating that districts must post lower numbers of disciplinary actions, especially involving minority students. The Daily Signal's Jared Stepman explains that according to the Obama Department of Justice, if black students were receiving more suspensions than white students, for instance, that could be seen as a violation of civil rights law. According to this thinking, it's not the behavior but the punishment that leads to a future of criminality. Rather than discipline bad actors, schools mainstream them and cross their fingers that no tragedies ensue. But lax discipline erodes academic standards. An unchecked violent behavior places students and teachers at risk, sometimes tragically. In 2018, 14 students and 3 staff members were killed in a shooting at a Parkland, Florida high school. Reports surfaced of 45 credible calls from citizens validating the impending danger shooter Nicholas Cruz posed, but he was never arrested for his destructive activities, assaults on students, or threats to kill them. He was never referred to law enforcement or expelled, just moved from school to school. The first Trump administration ended the Obama policy, but President Biden restored it. The Wall Street Journal reports that several states, including Arkansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Washington, and West Virginia, have responded with new policies which abolish obstacles to removing disruptive students from the classroom. Texas passed a Teacher's Bill of Rights, which includes a law that allows teachers more leeway to discipline disruptive students. Effective discipline is based upon behavior, not race. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews. Joining me in studio is Jeff Mateer, and joining me by phone is Liberty McArtor. And Liberty, we had a terrible incident this past Monday as a person entered a building in New York, ended up, as we understand it right now, getting on the wrong elevator and ended up shooting people and killing just a mother who was a boss, a mother, a friend of so many people. And we're seeing just more and more of these tragic shootings, it seems like. What are your thoughts on this? And tell us about that story.
Yeah, it was just so sad. Obviously, the event itself was sad, but then the reaction. And so this is an article I saw in the Free Press about how when one of the people who lost their lives, Wesley LePatner, she was a real estate executive for BlackRock, immediately the online reaction was a lot of people really making light of or outright celebrating her death. And what is especially shocking to me is the reporter, Maya Sulkin, of this article was actually able to get a lot of those people on the phone. And they had no shame, willing to talk about, admitting the fact that, yes, they didn't see it as a sad thing. It's very similar to the murder of the United Healthcare executive and just the upside down reaction to that. Some of the quotes that really shocked me were people saying, "I'm finding gun violence that I kind of relate to. I didn't know her personally, so to me, she's just a symbol." And again, it's very indicative of this worldview that does not value humanity for the sake of valuing humanity. It's all about who has power, who's the victim class. You're either on my side or you're absolutely evil. And if you're absolutely evil, then evil can be done to you, but it's justified. So it's, I think, a frightening trend we're seeing where violence is justified by certain quarters if it's done against the right people in their eyes.
You mentioned it was Luigi Mangione who shot the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, shot him in the back and killed him. And we covered this on Point of View on Weekend Edition several weeks ago, but there was a sort of a growing, making a hero out of him. There was somebody who wanted to make him Saint Luigi. They were creating swag that you could buy with his picture on it and other things. I mean, these are troubling notions that people are involved in.
Yeah. One of the things mentioned in this article, too, is, you still, I guess, not where I am, thankfully, but I guess in certain areas of the nation, people wearing the T-shirts, people are fist bumping, high-fiving with his face on it. And again, it's like, well, that person, in that perspective, that person is in a position that caused harm. They're evil because they're wealthy. And nobody, of course, they're not perfect human beings. Nobody is. But it justifies the murder. We had to take justice into our own hands. And so this is not something that's kind of they're hiding behind, that you are seeing more and more just bold arguments that this is the resort left to us if you view the world through that lens.
Well, I think we're, from a spiritual side of things, we're seeing the dark side of man. And a lot of times I think people have thoughts and ideas, but now we're having people actually express those thoughts and ideas, and we're seeing and act on them. And we're seeing, as a good Calvinist, it is the total depravity of man. And we're visualizing it. I had not seen this article before you sent, Liberty. And I obviously had heard about the shooting, but I was it literally took my breath away. The people that as you've gone through, the people cheering this on, the people applauding it. I mean, they're sick. I mean, that's the word I wrote down. These people are, and they really are. I mean, they are sick spiritually. That there's no doubt about it. We live in dark times. I mean, we absolutely live in dark times that people would cheer on the murder of a mother, a wife, completely innocent just because of who she worked for.
And, it's interesting because with the killing of Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione targeted him. In this case, as we understand it so far, the killer was was apparently going in to do something to the NFL people. They had an office up there, I believe, and he got on the wrong elevator and got out. And so there wasn't even a connection to Wesley. It was just somebody that he shot, and still people come up and cheer even though that was a random shooting.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and this is something that we're seeing across different issues, but the same root problem, the same sin problem, as Jeff was saying. Even a few months ago, you had the murder of two young people as they were leaving the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. And the murderer in that case, again, was called a martyr in multiple, by a certain group of people because he did it for Palestine, quote. So again, it's this trend that we're seeing of justifying violence, even murder, even horrific acts, if it's against a certain group of people that we classify as the enemy. And obviously, this is just extremely scary and dangerous territory for our nation.
Liberty, have you given any thought to what we do about this? Because whenever there's a shooting like this, there's usually calls for gun control or eliminating certain guns or access to them and so forth. Have you given any thought about what can be done?
Well, I'm not a big advocate for gun control. When you have certain people saying that murder against certain other people is justified, then all the more reason for the Second Amendment, in my opinion. And I don't want to just make it seem oversimplistic, but I think really the root of the issue is we have to articulate a biblical worldview. And so I think for Christian families, we need to make sure that we're really doing that intentionally from a young age, because if you're not articulating that, and then the prevailing worldview and culture when kids go off to school or college, or they're seeing these on social media, then they're going to pick up whatever moral code or standard is being communicated to them by the world. And if it's kind of this Marxist root of oppressor versus oppressed class, or who's in power versus who is the victim, rather than the biblical view that we're all sinful, we all fall short of the glory of God, we all need a savior, murder is always wrong, those biblical truths. If we're not intentional about communicating that, then our own children are going to be a lot more swayed by the culture. So I think we just have to start there.
It's an important point, because the Christian view also explains the existence of evil and why we may be seeing an explosion of evil coming up, because I see murders on the news every night. It just seems to be, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's anecdotal, but it just seems to be increasing.
Well, and to me, it seems to me it's a Romans 1. We're actually, in the case that the author here at Free Press, Maya Salkin, points out, you have people celebrating this. So you have people celebrating evil. And I think even the tone in reading her article, I think she's even surprised, that when she contacted these people, they didn't just say, oh, that was, in the moment I did that. Obviously that's wrong. No, they don't. They think what they're doing is great. So I think, what we're doing and what others need to do, we need to shed light on this, because when you say this to just a normal person, no, it's crazy. We don't applaud and cheer on the murder of innocent people.
If you'd like to see that article, we have it available for you at pointofview.net, so go and take a look at that. I'd encourage you to do so. You can also find out more about the EPA decision. I have an article, a statement from the EPA up there, and you can also find out about Dr. Sterling Burnett, and also some of the things that are happening in tariffs that we've covered over the past hour. When we come back, we've got several more topics, because it has been a busy week. So stay with us here on Point of View.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places, and some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and joining me in studio, Jeff Mateer. He is the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and Chief Legal Counsel for First Liberty Institute. We usually have First Liberty Institute in on Fridays as we do our weekend edition covering some of the issues that have happened over the past week. But also, First Liberty's been busy here recently.
Yeah, we've got a few things going on. I know the team back at the office would say not just a few. Many things going on. And so the latest one, and this is one that it came at the end of the school year, this past school year. Obviously, we're starting, believe it or not, it's August, so people are starting to think about
August 1st.
The new school year. But a school district in the state of Washington, we seem to specialize in school districts in the state of Washington. This one, actually interesting, this school district, which is Central Kitsap School District in Silverdale, Washington, is right next to the Bremerton School District, in which we had the great Coach Kennedy victory. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's why this teacher reached out to us. So we had a teacher reach out to us who, believe it or not, buddy, was under investigation. And you think, oh no, what did he do? Well, he's the Fellowship of Christian Athletes sponsor, mm-hmm. And they had the club had posted during the school year, had posted notices for their meetings, mm-hmm. and he's the advisor. And
was this online or in person?
No, in person. Like the old. Just think, in your high school, you post the clubs advertise for their meetings,
right? And
so the FCA, like the other clubs in this school, had put up their notice, and a co-teacher, another teacher, was offended because apparently it had been put outside his classroom. And what was he offended? And he was offended at the name that offends, if you're not a believer, offends every name, is offended at the name of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so he filed, and so think of this, one teacher files a complaint against another teacher because, the advisor should have stopped them from using the name Jesus in advertising the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And, one would think that would just it would be immediately dismissed, but it wasn't immediately dismissed. That they had to, of course, have an investigation. And actually, I think they used an outside firm to tell them
so they paid somebody to do that?
That this was, that you cannot prohibit the FCA club from using the name Jesus, and you cannot go against this teacher because he allowed that to happen. I mean, sometimes our cases sound ridiculous, mm-hmm. but because sometimes people do ridiculous things, and it just seems, I think it's the greatest irony of ironies that this is the same school. This is a school district that's basically across town from the one that had to go to the Supreme Court and lose, and then end up paying millions of dollars of attorney's fees for losing a case. But to the school, so I say that, but at the same time, I'll applaud the school district because when we got involved, we pointed out, hey, you can't do this. Mm-hmm. And they've said, yes, you're right. We can't do this. So we give them that. They didn't want to pay $2 million and plus in
so you begin
fees.
to wonder, is it something in the water up there? Or
Well, it is the state of Washington.
It is the state of Washington.
It's a beautiful place, but their politics and their liberal agenda sort of takes over. So.
And what other cases have you got pending right now?
Yeah, well, we've got a lot. So there are the big news since we've been together last, but we have talked on the air a little bit, but our team is working really hard on. Supreme Court did agree to take one of our cases, which involves a man who was told he couldn't stand at a particular place in a public park and share the gospel, that he had to go move away from all the people.
Mm-hmm.
That case, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear. We anticipate that they'll hear that case at the end of probably maybe November, December, January. And so the team is working really, really hard. And then there are two other cases that we're asking the Supreme Court to hear. One is where the state of New York is requiring Amish school children to be vaccinated and not having any exceptions to that. And then the other is a case that's been going on. I think it's been going on almost 8 years. So it's like the Kennedy case. It's the case where two Christian schools played against each other in the state championship game at what we would know as the Gator Bowl, and they were told they couldn't pray over the PA system, and so it's a public prayer case. And we're asking the Supreme Court to take that case.
Now you're talking about places where Christians are being persecuted or denied rights. Sometimes that's happened at the federal workforce, but the Trump administration, I think, has done something to try to make sure that doesn't happen there.
Yeah, it's truly night and day, and we've heard the phrase, we've repeated the phrase, elections make a difference, and in this case, they very, very much make a difference. The Biden administration was pushing this strong DEI. Anything religious was bad. Anything that was equity and diversity was good, and certainly LGBT was good. And what the Trump administration has done through its Office of Personnel Management, OPM, what they've done is issued guidelines for federal workers. There are, I believe, 2.4 million. The largest employer.
Fewer than there used to be.
Well, that's true. That's true. And but the largest employer in the United States is the federal government. So OPM has issued guidelines, which really what they've done is taken two of our First Liberty cases, the Kennedy case, and then our Groff, which was the Sabbath honoring postman case. And what they've told federal agencies, you have to shockingly, you have to abide by the law, and you have to give religious accommodations. You have to respect religious beliefs, and that federal employees don't have to check their religious beliefs when they walk through the office doors.
Did this come down as an executive order, or how did this come out from you said OPM?
OPM, it's guidance. And so what the Obama administration was the king at issuing these guidance letters. And so and the Biden administration continued. And so the Trump administration says, well, if they can do that, we can too. So they're guidance. And so they're not legally binding, but they're certainly legally informing. And it'll go a long way to protecting religious liberty in the federal workplace. And this is an example, Buddy, where actually for I think the first time that actually private employers can learn something from the federal government. I don't know if we've ever said that before, but in this area that they can, which is to respect religious liberty rights of employees.
If you want to find out more about that, we have a link to an article that discusses that on our website at pointofview.net, so I'd encourage you to go there and find out more about it. When we're talking about religious liberty, and we've talked a little bit about DEI, you mentioned that, there's also something that's happening in the DEI in the Olympics. And I was pleased to see a news article that came out about this earlier. The Olympics is making some changes, and I think you'll like it. So stay with us. We'll talk about that when we come back after the break.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The Trump administration recently unveiled their plans for the Golden Dome. I was intrigued by the response to this new missile defense system. As you would imagine, Russia and China condemned the plans. Most Americans didn't have much to say about the plans. Go back a few decades and nearly everyone criticized a similar plan. It was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, and dubbed by critics as Star Wars. I remember prominent scientists like Carl Sagan ridiculing the idea that a defense missile could be fired into space to destroy an incoming missile from the Soviet Union. It is much harder to criticize the science behind the Golden Dome now that everyone has seen how effective Israel's Iron Dome has become. Alan Zhang argues that the Golden Dome is America's answer to China's space weapons. He points to the irony of China condemning this defense system because it's turning supposedly outer space into a new arena for armed confrontation. Of course, such condemnation is deeply hypocritical. The Golden Dome, he says, is a defensive system developed in response to the rapid expansion of military space programs by China and other adversarial powers. Its purpose is to serve as a shield designed to intercept a range of inbound threats, including ballistic, cruise, and hypersonic missiles. Let's put a few facts on the table. In just the last 6 years, China has tripled the number of intelligence satellites they put into orbit. China's military has also been exploring the use of what are called fractional orbital bombardment systems. This technology was used during the Cold War to evade early warning radars. Contrary to what Russia and China are saying, this defensive shield is not destabilizing. It is a deterrence against the military intentions of these two enemies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of Israel, go to viewpoints.info/Israel. Viewpoints.info/Israel. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. Jeff Matera joining me in studio, and I'm reading the introduction to an article we've got featured on pointofview.net. In another confirmation that elections have consequences, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee has changed their eligibility rules to prevent men from competing in female athletic competitions. Jeff, common sense is breaking out all over.
Yeah, I mean, what shocking! We're gonna prohibit men from competing in women's sports, but let's give credit. There were look, the wackos on the left put a lot of pressure and made this a civil rights issue. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the U.S. Olympic Committee is said enough with this nonsense. I mean, we know and we saw it. We've seen it play out, right? I mean, we saw it play out, and at least four U.S. males have competed in the last two Olympics.
And I remember in the last one, there was in the boxing, they had female boxing, women boxing, and a man was competing as a female, and one of the women got knocked out quickly, and she came out and said she had never been hit so hard. And you can imagine that because men oftentimes, on average, are going to be bigger and stronger than women. That's not true every case, but on average they are. And if you've been training for boxing for years and you come in as a male, as a woman, you may very well be much stronger than a lot of the women there.
Yeah, and that certainly is a health issue, right? I mean, there's a risk for greater injury, and the other is anytime a man, a biologically born man, we have to say that now, takes the spot of a woman. I mean, that's one woman who did not have the opportunity to be an Olympic athlete, and that's right. In the age of equality with women, I mean, how is that fair? So that we have, men can compete and do that. So, I mean, we've talked about this before on the air, but it's finally that at least someone is recognizing. And again, the NCAA is doing this now, and some other sports leagues, and it's about time. And as this article makes, it's good, but it's not enough. I mean, we've been talking about root problems. There's something wrong with a society that we even entertain these thoughts. I hope now the International Olympic Committee will be next, because it has all these weird rules about whether you've had hormone treatment and what your levels are. And I mean, no, it's really easy. If the person was born a man, then they should not be able to compete against women. That real easy rule.
There's been some talk about making a separate class for transgender athletes. My guess is that's probably not going to go anywhere, because I can't imagine there's that many people who would be able to do that, or would be that concerned. It costs
and who
money.
Wants to watch it?
Who wants to watch it?
I mean, it all will come down to because the Olympics is big business, and the networks pay big bucks.
Yes.
And do people want to watch? I mean, we watch what, and if you watch the viewing is skewed to what most Americans want to see, which is gymnastics. I mean, we know what they are. It's gymnastics and the water events seem to be, and occasionally they'll throw in a good track and field event. At least in the summer Olympics. But I mean, do we really want? I mean, would that really draw the attention? I hope not, and I don't think so.
But while we're talking about the Olympics, remember in the Olympics last summer there was an issue in the beginning where they did a thing that looked like it was the Last Supper, and you had a person dressed up and bizarrely, and the Olympics need to just get back to doing what Olympics should be doing,
like holding sporting events. Not doing political,
with the best athletes of their own gender in the world.
No, that's exactly what they need to be doing. That, and then really that goes for all sports. And I think, to me, it's interesting. We knew we would talk about baseball because I'm here, right? So let me lead into a baseball. But don't recall, it wasn't that long ago that Atlanta, what was the All-Star game was ripped from Atlanta.
Right.
Well, what happened this summer? Guess where we were? The Major League Baseball's All-Star game was at Atlanta. And nothing has changed in Georgia. I mean, they all of a sudden, the left is happy with Georgia. And I have an observation. So I spent with some friends have spent, I think, the last 4 years during the 4th of July in Boston. So Boston, Massachusetts, not necessarily known as a hotbed of conservatism, actually quite liberal. And I will tell you, there was two observations from our trip a few weeks ago over July 4th. Was in the past we kind of arrived at the end of June. And then carried through the July 4th. Well, the end of June, of course, we know what June is in many places June is Gay Pride Month. And the last few years in Boston, lots of flags, lots of signs. Not there this year.
Really?
Hardly at all. Hardly at all. And then, as I mentioned off the air, the one of the coolest things that we got to participate is on the morning of July 4th, from the old State House, from the balcony, the same place that when Queen Elizabeth later would come and kind of give this great speech about sort of accepting that we actually do have independence, but in that same balcony, it's where in a few weeks after July 4th in 1776, the Declaration was read to the citizens of Boston. Well, I was there, and they had a reenactment, so the 249th year reenactment, and there weren't hundreds of people there celebrating our great country. There were thousands. and just dressed in red, white, and blue and holding signs, just a wonderful. And I really think America, I think we're done with pushing ideologies, and we're done with the left-wing wacko ideas. And I think America just wants to get back to celebrate the good things about America.
Karl Rove had his column in the Wall Street Journal this week about the upcoming, are we calling, what is the 250th? It's not Sesqua, it's 250. I'll just go with that. But also President Trump has got the Liberty Committee that Kelly is on.
The Presidential Religious Liberty Commission
is going to be reporting by then, I think.
Yeah, they're to give their results by July 4th. But I think just being out and about, I think there's a real new current of patriotism. And look, we'll give credit where credit's due. I think Donald Trump is a large part of that because to his credit, he's ending this silliness. And that's why I go back to this story. The Olympic Committee, what the U.S. Olympic Committee has done is just end silliness. Men are men, women are women. Let's respect that. Let's not take opportunities away from women by having men who claim that they're women.
Well, to that point, we're just through many of the companies reporting their second quarter financials and so forth. But there's been news stories about many of the companies saying, a year or two ago, these companies were, as they were giving these reports, they would talk about their DEI efforts and so forth. And that's just sort of off they're not even really mentioning these things anymore.
No, and I think that's what we saw in Boston. I think all these companies in the past felt like they were being compelled to do whatever to show their support for a political movement that they're not doing that anymore. It's okay not to do that. And shockingly, what businesses are focused on actually like maximizing profits? What? How dare they do that? No, I think some good things on that front.
To your point about some of the things that some of the states were doing, one of the things that Gavin Newsom, as governor of California, did was to say that he was prohibiting any California state employee from traveling to Texas because of our various approaches and things, and using the state funds to pay for that. And yet Gavin Newsom was in the state this week to do something related to the Texas redistricting, which is going on right now. And when we come back, we'll talk about that. I've got an article on pointofview.net to highlight what the new map would look like. And even though this is focusing on Texas trying to create more Republican districts, other states could follow either Republican or Democrat. They could do this, and it'll be interesting to see if we have more states coming up with sort of mid-season, in between the Census Bureau efforts to try to redistrict. Usually, it's only done after the Census Bureau. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
In 19th century London, two towering historical figures did battle, not with guns and bombs, but words and ideas. London was home to Karl Marx, the father of communism, and legendary Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon. London was in many ways the center of the world, economically, militarily, and intellectually. Marx sought to destroy religion, the family, and everything the Bible supports. Spurgeon stood against him, warning of socialism's dangers. Spurgeon understood Christianity is not just religious truth, it is truth for all of life. Where do you find men with that kind of wisdom to stand against darkness today? Get the light you need on today's most pressing issues delivered to your inbox when you sign up for the Viewpoints commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Every weekday in less than 2 minutes, you'll learn how to be a person of light to stand against darkness in our time. It's free, so visit pointofview.net/signup right now. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
Back with our final half hour here on Point of View as we do our weekend edition. Joining me in studio, Jeff Mateer with First Liberty Institute. And Jeff, President Trump asked the state of Texas to do some redistricting and find 5 more Republican seats in the state. Governor Abbott has called a special session, and that's what they're doing right now. And so they just released, I think yesterday, the map of their initial drawing of it. We have a link to that, a Texas Tribune article on our website at pointofview.net. So I encourage you to go take a look at that. What's interesting about this is this is really consuming Texas, but it has much broader implications because if you have a Democratic president in the next term, that Democratic president might say, California, go draw me some new districts. Illinois, New York, draw some new districts. Get us some more Democrats in. It looks like Texas is trying to come up with at least 4 or 5 new seats. But what do you think about what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there are 2 ways to look at it and 2 ways we should look at it. One is sort of legal. I mean, can they do this? And then the other question is, should they do this? And so I'm more comfortable. I'm a lawyer, so the first one I'm more comfortable I'm talking about. But I do have observations about the second. The first one is, I mean, legally, can they do it? Yes. Because
typically they do this after the census. Every 10 years when they do the census, it usually moves legislators around from one. Texas has been picking up states, congressional districts. California's been losing some, but so they do that when they get the new census findings. But it's unusual to do it during that 10-year period.
It's unusual, but it's not unprecedented. And Texas, and I should have looked up the exact numbers, but Texas has been in litigation over its maps for at least 2 decades, and even as they do this exercise they're doing now of redistricting, the maps that are in place now are in court and being challenged.
Explain that. Why is that? Because the state draws it, it's passed by the state, but then they get challenged. And why is that?
They get challenged, and it's the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is an anti-discrimination act, which prohibits discrimination in drawing your congressional lines. And so the challenges, again, for 20 plus years have been that when the Texas legislature draws its lines, it's engaged in a form of racial discrimination. And so that's the hook. Now, for part of that time, the Supreme Court looked very favorable on those claims and actually in reviewing cases made it fairly easy to make a racial challenge. Well, that changed a few years ago, and now they very, very much have been going back to the actual language of the act, not what courts want, and you actually have to show certain things under the act, and one of those is being intent, and actually show that a legislature is acting with intent to discriminate against people of color. Those claims are hard to make, so I think what the Texas in defending the Texas legislature now on the legality is, look, this is politics, and there is nothing wrong. There's no standard that it's unfair or this is political or you have more votes and you have to treat the other side fair. That's not the standard. The standard is, are you engaged in racial discrimination? And if you really look at it, I know we all have through the years looked at different maps in different states. And what has happened is none of them make sense, right? That sometimes they're long and skinny and they do all these things. I mean, and you sit and you count, well, how many minorities are in this and how many not? And we're going to make so many minority districts and that in itself, I mean, some of it is argued is if in drawing the maps, you take race into consideration, then you're engaged in racial discrimination, even if it means that you're doing to promote a race, because that's a form of affirmative action, which the court says is wrong and violates the Constitution. So what the Texas Republicans are doing now is, yes, they're going back. They're engaged in a very political process, but there's nothing that prohibits politics. They just can't engage in racial discrimination. And actually, some of the things, I mean, I would have been more comfortable had they done this originally, but they're actually doing some common sense things. Like, why have we historically divided up the cities? Because what they've always done is they take a city like Austin and they divide it into 4 or 5 pieces, and then it goes out from Austin. And so it kind of fans out. So you get part of Austin and that goes out. Well, is that really the best way? Shouldn't Austin itself have its own congressman who represents Austin, and then the rural areas outside of Austin, then they have their own congressman, and that you draw the lines based upon not including cities, but maybe a city is one congressman and out. And if you really look at the proposal, now this won't be the proposal that eventually goes to the governor. I mean, what they've tried to do is take Dallas and have most of Dallas represented by one person, not 6 people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, not 6 or 7 people, and so that you would have a really geographic base for political representation. So, having said so, first point, it's legal. It's legal as long as they don't engage in racial discrimination. Now, should they be doing it? Boy, I don't know, because I think it is the point that you've kind of led to in the introduction. I mean, Texas is going to do this, and then California is going to do it. And then California will do it, and then Florida will do it. I mean, we just play this game, and if we're constantly redistricting, I mean, we're constantly engaged in this, I'm not sure that's good for American democracy. Well, I'm 4 or 5 more Republican seats. I think that would help my friend Mike Johnson a lot better if he had a little more cushion. But I worry what happens.
One of the problems is that the Supreme Court wants them to create districts that can ensure some minority votes win. Right. And so minorities have historically tended to vote in smaller numbers. And so you couldn't just say, all right, well, we got 45% black or Hispanic in this district. They wanted to be more like 55 or 60% so that they could ensure that they would get somebody that they felt like would represent them. But that a couple of things, and I've said this several times over the years, as people move out into neighborhoods, as segregation diminishes, as families end up being multi-race families and so forth, trying to do that seems to be harder and harder. And so Republicans are just openly saying, we're trying to get more Republicans. In the past, maybe 20 years ago, that would mean more white people, more Democrats would mean more black people. That's changing as well. So it's an interesting dynamic that's going on as things evolve.
Well, I mean, in the past, you've talked about we've talked about you've got to have minority districts, and usually that what that meant was either African American or Hispanic. Well, you can no longer say that Hispanic means Democrat, right? Because I mean, along the border, the people are voting of any color are voting Republican, and so you could create a district that could elect a Hispanic, and that Hispanic is a Republican, and so is that a minority district then? Well. It is, but they wouldn't say it is. So I think when you have the race admission cases in higher education, the message that the Roberts Court has sent is you cannot use race as a factor. And so if you say you have to have certain number of minority districts, you're using race, and my view is that violates the Constitution. So again, I don't disagree that the Republicans in Texas can't do this. Actually, I think they should have done it 2 years ago. That the question is, should they be engaged at right now in the middle? And I that makes me a little uncomfortable. But I think what they're doing is permissible.
And of course, as you point out, if the Republicans do it, then you sort of open the door for the next Democratic president to say, I want certain districts, I want certain states to redistrict as well. And you get the perpetual redistricting, which I suspect most people would rather avoid if we could.
Yeah, absolutely, because then that consumes the legislature.
When we come back, we want to talk about something that's going on in Gaza out there. We've heard stories all week about things getting terrible in Gaza, but there are occasional articles from people coming up who say we're not getting the right information from people. Some of the pictures that we see are being doctored, or these are people that look in terrible condition, but they have other medical conditions. So when we come back, we want to talk a little bit about Gaza, and do we get the information that we really need to make good decisions? So stay with us. We'll be right back.
School discipline policies in several states are changing for the better. The shift comes after President Trump issued an executive order last April aimed at restoring common sense to school discipline. The order states the federal government will no longer tolerate known risks to children's safety and well-being in the classroom that result from the application of school discipline based on discriminatory and unlawful equity ideology. In 2014, the Obama administration issued guidelines stating that districts must post lower numbers of disciplinary actions, especially involving minority students. The Daily Signal's Jared Stepman explains that according to the Obama Department of Justice, if black students were receiving more suspensions than white students, for instance, that could be seen as a violation of civil rights law. According to this thinking, it's not the behavior but the punishment that leads to a future of criminality. Rather than discipline bad actors, schools mainstream them and cross their fingers that no tragedies ensue. But lax discipline erodes academic standards. An unchecked violent behavior places students and teachers at risk, sometimes tragically. In 2018, 14 students and 3 staff members were killed in a shooting at a Parkland, Florida high school. Reports surfaced of 45 credible calls from citizens validating the impending danger shooter Nicholas Cruz posed, but he was never arrested for his destructive activities, assaults on students, or threats to kill them. He was never referred to law enforcement or expelled, just moved from school to school. The first Trump administration ended the Obama policy, but President Biden restored it. The Wall Street Journal reports that several states, including Arkansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Washington, and West Virginia, have responded with new policies which abolish obstacles to removing disruptive students from the classroom. Texas passed a Teacher's Bill of Rights, which includes a law that allows teachers more leeway to discipline disruptive students. Effective discipline is based upon behavior, not race. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And back with our final segment on Point of View's Weekend Edition. And one of the stories that we've just heard a lot of the news is the starvation that's going on in Gaza. People who are starving because food is not getting in. And we've seen a lot of pictures in the media. And there was a story this week about a young boy named Muhammad who seemed to be just very, very skinny and looks to be dying from starvation. But there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, Gaza starvation photos tell 1,000 lies. It's by Idiom Fishberger. And he says in there about Muhammad, the young boy, the small child who you can see that is just really, really suffering from malnutrition. He says that wasn't the truth about Muhammad, nor is it the truth about what's happening in Gaza. Muhammad suffers from cerebral palsy, according to a British investigative journalist, David Collier, who uncovered a local charity's May 2025 report mentioning the boy's condition. And CNN covered it in part. So, Jeff, I struggle with this because clearly there's serious problems in Gaza. No question about that. And the people have been there since October 2023, after the attack. But I don't know that we're always getting the truth about some of these, because there are people who have a certain incentive to try to hype certain conditions to try to get public emotions and feelings. And I noticed this just in the president's one big beautiful bill. It had Medicaid reform in there, and the legislation specifically excludes from work people who have disabilities, people who are in nursing homes and so forth. And yet I would hear the news stories go to somebody who has a major disability saying, I'm concerned about losing my Medicaid. Well, the bill excludes you, but we're hearing this from the media, and this plays on people's sympathies. And I just don't know if we know what's really true and happening in Gaza.
No, I think that's exactly right, and we're seeing. I mean, as they get called on it, the media bias is evident. They have a story they want to tell. Don't let the facts get in way of telling that story. And I believe Ambassador Huckabee is traveling in the region this weekend to go firsthand to see what's going on. And I get it from the Israeli point of view. They're saying there's no story here, that there isn't starvation, and I think we recognize. Look, it's a war zone, and there's going to be suffering, and the U.S. is trying to get food there. I think the real culprit here, I mean, obviously Hamas, but we expect Hamas to be Hamas. But to me, the real culprit here, and this piece is from the Journal, right? From the Journal points out, I think the real culprit and the real person, the real entity that should be held accountable is the UN. I think the UN is engaged in the same thing the news media is involved. They have a story they want to tell. And they're going to support it. And the story is Israel's bad. They're always bad. They're the oppressors, and they can't do anything right. We need there to be a situation that's horrible. But the UN, I think they're pursuing their own political agenda. The fact that they will not participate in distributing this food, I think it's a tragedy. And look, one piece of advice, I don't know if I usually give advice to the Trump administration on religious liberty issues, but let me step outside my area. I think, and you may disagree with me because it does serve some functions, let's defund the UN. I think in 2023, which is the last year I know, and I looked it up a little bit ago, $13 billion, U.S., the largest contributor of any country in the world, $13 billion to the UN. Trump has stopped, the wacko universities and threatened them and defunded them. Trump is defunding Planned Parenthood. Let's defund the UN. What does the UN do for the United States? And I know that's a pretty radical right-wing position, perhaps, but I'm just sick. I mean, when you read these stories, the UN's the problem here. I mean, people, if there are people starving, which I won't go with as far as the Israelis, there's nothing here. No, there's no doubt that there are people in need. Well, isn't that why we have the UN?
My recollection is there have been times when on the UN Human Rights Council that Syria was the head of the Human Rights Council, maybe Iran or Cuba. I mean, you look at some of the things they do and you think, what are you thinking there? But, on this issue of Gaza, the Israelis want to claim that things aren't happening. I suspect some things are. But, they talk about, and they now say that if trucks come in, gangs sometimes get around. Gangs, I think, may be a euphemism for Hamas. And one of the things that the negotiations broke down either earlier this week or end of last week because Israel wants Hamas to surrender, give back the hostages. Some are alive, some are not. Give them back and surrender. And in Germany, the Germans surrender.
Yes.
And they said, we're surrendering. You come in and take care of us. But Hamas was not surrendering this. And I think Hamas, to some extent, benefits or feels like it benefits from these stories from people who say we're being starved here by the Israelis. I think that's a Hamas plan.
No, I think, and we've seen reports. I mean, what's Hamas do? They set up and they operate out of schools and hospitals. Mm-hmm. Well, why do they do that? Because then when the Israelis do say, "Oh, you've bombed a hospital, you've bombed a school," and so I mean, the Hamas is a terrorist organization. And then you've got again, I'm over the top on the UN, perhaps, but I just think the UN is a co-conspirator in this.
One of the things I heard one of the Norwegian groups that provide aid to suffering people in Gaza, and they were complaining, and the anchor was asking the lady, aren't there a lot of trucks out there? Yes, but they're not enough for getting through, and the gangs are getting them, and Israel's not stopping that. And then he said, but aren't they doing airdrops, planes flying over dropping? And she said, yes, but the airdrops are sometimes they land on people and hurt them, or they go out in the water and people drown trying to get out in the water to get them. And I thought, it sounds like you just don't accept anything. I mean, it's a tough situation. How do you get things to these people? And even if I have trouble believing that people can't move out of the way of an airdrop coming down on a parachute.
I mean, didn't we do that in World War II? I mean, Americans would go in and drop and drop items. I think we've done it in other parts of the world too. Now, I mean that is someone who that doesn't fit with their narrative. And therefore they're going to discount it or ignore it.
And it gets back to this point of it's just hard for us, if you're here, to know what's true when you hear the media say one thing and you see pictures that may not be the other, or you have somebody writing apparently with some credibility saying these pictures that you've seen, that's not really the whole story, and begin to explain other parts of the story that we're just not hearing.
Well, and I think that's why Ambassador Huckabee wanted to go down and inspect. And you think about the security logistics of an American ambassador going into Gaza. But God bless Mike Huckabee that he's willing to go down there. And sometimes you just got to go look, with your own eyes. So it'll be interesting when we start to hear his reports.
I'm really looking forward to his report because I'd like to see what he has to say about this. Well, Jeff Mateer, tell us a little bit about First Liberty.
Yeah, so for First Liberty, we're defending religious liberty for all Americans, and you can find out more about our work at firstliberty.org. Mm-hmm. We've got, as I mentioned earlier in a prior segment, we've got 3 cases at the Supreme Court right now that we're working on, but we've got cases.
You've been very successful at the Supreme Court.
9-0 in the last 6 years, yeah. So I think Governor DeSantis said that we found the secret sauce, I believe. So I agree with Governor DeSantis about that.
Well, we have more links to the stories we've talked about today at pointofview.net. So I would encourage you to go there. While you're there, see the donate button, and I encourage you to hit that. I think Kirby will be back on Monday. I know you'll be looking forward to that. And I thank you. I want to thank Megan for producing, for engineering, and Steve for producing. And thank you for listening to Point of View.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.